Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week is part 2 with my chat with my friend Erin. Part 1 was released last week, so if you haven't listened to that, be sure to go check that out because it's a great one. Obviously, last week we spoke about sort of photography and photojournalism because that's what Erin does as a passion, a hobby, and partly as a job. And then we also spoke about sort of parenting, anxiety, her snowboarding, people's struggles, and all sorts of other things. So following on from that, we end up talking about the homeless and sort of the homelessness epidemic that's in Southampton, which is a city in the south of England, as well as Britain in general. And I know in America there's quite a few places. I believe Los Angeles and San Francisco, from what I know, does have quite a bad homelessness problem. So we talk about that as one of Erin's projects, one of our photo sort of projects, was about photographing the homeless and sort of talking to them. And she has some brilliant insight into them, and it's a real down-to-earth, gritty look at the homeless sort of epidemic and what we try and discuss all the sort of things that we potentially could do, but they are still people, and there's that weird disconnect that all of us have been guilty of, where you walk past a homeless person and you just don't, you don't, not necessarily you don't consider them to be human, but you don't look at them in the same way. I'm not saying you should always give them money and things. We do actually talk about that, how giving money to a homeless person, it's a good act, but it's not going to necessarily change their whole situation. It's a societal problem and things. So we delve into that sort of thing. We then also get into social media and mental health. Again, we kind of look back to mental health as it's quite a prevalent part of both mine and Erin's lives. A lot of the people we associate with do suffer with mental illness quite a lot. We talk about sort of the support networks and helping people with that. We also talk about compliments and that people don't really give out compliments anymore and how bizarre that is and how people should really, because it's nice, isn't it? So we talk about that and delve into that. We also talk about how babies die without physical contact, which sounds really sudden and weird and a bizarre thing to bring up. It does make sense in the context, and I do look up something in the podcast that kind of supports that, and I've heard it from I think another podcast, funnily enough. The baby's not dying without physical contact. Sorry, baby's dying without physical contact. It's a strange one, but we do discuss it in the podcast, so more details about that as you obviously, if you listen on. And then we kind of finish up the podcast by talking about marketing and design a bit more, sort of what Erin's doing with her life at the moment, as well as what I would do with £1,000,000, which if you've listened to the episode of Carla, which I think is episode 7 or something similar, then I've already said kind of what I would do, but it's a sort of a reprise of that. But then more importantly, what Erin would actually do with that kind of money. And that's the whole what would you do with £1,000,000 sort of question. Is it might be something I end up bringing into the podcast towards the end quite a lot. It's quite a nice way to sort of wrap things up, and a lot of the people I talk to, if not all of them thus far, have been genuinely good people. So I'd like to really hear about what any of these people would do with £1,000,000, what sort of great ideas they could have. The one with Carla, I'd really recommend people go back and listen to that, but she talks about sort of creating her own community in a sense, which is really interesting, and Erin's idea is really good as well. It's very community driven. So this one, it's another great one. This is obviously, as I said, because of all the subject matter, this isn't it's not a funny podcast. Obviously, we do have a laugh to a degree because it's an informal chat between friends, but it's one of those, the more serious side of podcasts of the ones that at least we do on Genuine Chit Chat, about some of the more important social issues. Excuse me. And just before we get going, I want to do a shout out to the Espresso Boys, which is EXPRESSO Boys. Only specifically say the spelling because certain people spell the word espresso as in a coffee with an X or with an S and that sort of thing. I wouldn't want people not being able to find the podcast, but I've put the link in the description and that sort of thing, so you should be able to find it there. But yeah, they're just a couple of guys who just have sort of the tagline of the podcast is a podcast about nothing where they talk about everything, and that's basically what it is. It's in the same or similar format to this one where it's just a conversational thing, but it's the two co-hosts just discussing an all matter of things, sometimes with guests, sometimes not. So if you like the sort of format of this podcast, but you like it a little bit less structured, because obviously mine is kind of, each episode is sort of, it has a theme or a genre or some sort of thing like that. There are certain ones where I just talk about nonsense for 2 hours with a friend, which it's almost more so what theirs is like. It's a little bit less, but they do actually have topics written down and things. I mean, I'm slaughtering this shout out, to be honest with you. I'm doing terribly. And the funny thing is, this podcast is being released, I think, a day before. I think they said they'd do a shout out for me, which is lovely. So it's like theirs is going to be released afterwards, and their shout out is probably going to be 10 times better than this one. This is just a bloody rambling mess. So I apologise to both the Espresso Boys and all of you guys listening. But go check that out. It's a really cool podcast. You know, we spoke a little bit on Reddit, and then I checked their podcast out, and I'm subscribed now. So it's a wonderful podcast. If you like this one, you'll probably like the other one, if not more. So yeah, go check out the Espresso Boys. Anyway, apart from that ramble of a shout out, this is why people need to send me their promos, because then I don't slaughter it. But yeah, thanks as always for tuning in, guys. I'll be back at the end to give the sort of usual details and whatnot. You know, be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and all that sort of jazz. And I'll get on with the show. Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton.
For one of my projects, I actually photographed a homeless man. I got quite a good rapport with him. We'd only really give like barely any money, but we would definitely give food or like hot chocolate or something just to kind of get him through. And it was just kind of horrific because he genuinely was down and out. There was no way about it. Just the kind of general state of him, you could tell it wasn't kind of made up, which you can, if anyone lives in Southampton, you definitely know who are the ones that are fake and who are real.
People with smartphones and things like that.
Yeah, so often see it in the high street actually, that the homeless people's bosses come along. Right. And they have a you can hear them have a discussion about, oh, so-and-so's here and you're here and so-and-so's down the road. And then I guess they pull their money for whatever.
Yeah.
But this guy was genuinely down and out, and it takes a lot to kind of go up to him and like say, how did you get in this position?
Yeah.
And the end kind of thing is, I was really depressed. My wife lost our child. I didn't handle it very well, and I went in a downward spiral, and that's how I ended up here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just, you think people that may not necessarily need as much as help as this individual being given housing or whatever they need, which is fair enough. They may need it as well, but you've got someone that generally is like, I need help. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be stuck here.
Yeah. And
even to the point where he was ill, he went to the hospital and they kicked him out at 4 o'clock in the morning. Where's someone going to go at 4 o'clock in the morning? Yeah. It's just, the culture we live in sometimes makes me think, what can be done? And it just seems like there's never an easy answer, because if you come up with one answer, it will lead to another question. Well, if we do that, this will happen. And it's always like, but.
Exactly. And it always stops things happening before they start. A lot of the time, instead of, you get a lot of people in America right now. One of the big things is, I've spoken about gun laws on the podcast quite a lot, so I'm not going to delve into the depth of that again. But like with gun laws, one of the things that a lot of the sort of the more right-wing people want to protect the gun rights are, they go, and the people left-wing who want to obviously put more gun control in, they're left people saying, right, we need to start registering it, we need to do this, we need to do these little incremental things over time. And then the people more so on the right are like, no, we can't do any of that, because either the change is too big and it will ruin everything, or it's so small it won't make a difference. So it keeps being, every time there's a shooting or something, there's almost the same debate going on. Now it's starting to happen, I think, a lot, as with social media, and obviously the sheer amount of mass shootings in the last year or two has gone up so ridiculously. But it's like, people want there to be a right answer that has no consequence with really complicated social issues. Like, one of the things I've becoming more into terms with is a universal basic income. Just like, say everyone in Britain gets $7,000 just for being not being British, but people living in Britain get $7,000. That's it. And then you can work obviously as well to get over that, but that takes some of the financial pressure off people of, you can afford to feed your family, you can afford to live, you can afford to do this, or maybe with that you have £5,000 and 2,000 worth of food vouchers. Or so, I'm not a politician and I'm not a policymaker. I don't have all the answers, but just even getting in the conversation of trying to figure these things out with a homelessness epidemic. Okay, well, what about some of these derelict buildings and things like that? Like, if we had enough money in government and whatnot to be able to make like houses for people who are homeless, and there are some hostels and some great charities who do a lot of work and help these people.
Yeah.
But it's like we shouldn't have, like, when I went to Iceland, I don't think I saw any homeless people. Now, I'm not an expert in knowing about Iceland, sort of the difficulty in the social dynamic or anything like that, but from what a lot of the European and more liberal countries do is there almost aren't any homeless, because if you get to that stage, you get help in a lot of ways. And that's what we need. But when you start talking about universal basic income, people go, well, how'd you get the money? And I'd argue, cut it from war and tax the rich more. But then you get these other people who say, oh, but if you do that, then this will happen. If you do that. And it's like, every time before we do anything, we've got someone saying no. And then people complain that nothing's changing. And it's like, we have to actually try something,
It's weird you kind of say that, because I've had many discussions about, how can homeless people be helped? And I always thought, there's so many buildings around that they're just empty. In Southampton, you walk past them, it's empty. It's been empty for God knows how long. Like, surely, if that was maybe 3-4 bedroom house, you could have some beds in each room and have someone managing that house. And that the deal is that maybe they need to do community service or something for a few hours a day, so they've got a roof over their head, and that's the way they maintain it, and that's the way that they have a purpose. Because when I was speaking to some of the homeless, it was, I'm invisible. Like, no one would care if I dropped off the face of the earth. I don't have a face and I don't have a name. I'm just look at that inconvenience to the eye on the street. So actually, or that I say, we get them to do some community work or something, and people might think, oh, well, you can't just force them to do that, but actually it could give them purpose, and it could actually restructure their life for them to actually want to do something else. Because 9 times out of 10, it's not that they don't want to, it's that they've got to a position where they do not have the first step up to actually change their future, because they don't have somewhere to have a shower, they don't have the right clothes for maybe a job interview, they can't even get a roof over their head, although they're trying, and they're going into a council office every so often. It's just one of those things. It is,
it's a real hard one, and the longer we leave it, the worse it's going to get, and it becomes more of a, someone gets stuck in a hole, and if you can give them a helping hand to get out the hole, then they'll be fine. But it's normally that first initial step towards it, and it is, when you say about the community service thing, one of the things I was thinking was, well, to save quite a bit of money for Britain, I just thought about it then, would be with drug users, for example. If you get found using cocaine or heroin or anything like that, you can get a lot of jail time. And a lot of studies have shown that people, when they're incarcerated, it doesn't help them. But what can help them a lot is being under either house arrest and or doing community service. That's normally better for people than just being locked up with loads of other people for X amount of years. And with certain crimes that make people maybe not dangerous to others, like a degree of theft and potentially fraud, depending on to what level it is, and then drug use, you could argue, well, instead of having certain jail time, you just have a strict community service schedule, and then with that, the money that you'd save from having to have them incarcerated for X amount of time, feeding them their people's wages when they're obviously the guards, the living spaces, all these, every person you have. I can't remember if this was in America or in England, but it was 30,000 either dollars or pounds to have someone incarcerated in a year. And you think, well, if they're in there for a year, you just use that 30 grand to invest in getting them, put them through community service for example, the homeless, or that sort of thing. And then that £30,000 could go towards, they could get a small amount of money for doing the community service as well, a much reduced rate, I'd say, than a standard wage potentially, but it depends on their living situation. See, all these other complications that come out of it. But with that money, just £30,000, if he's got £30,000, I could sort out food for the homeless people in Southampton. If there's 100, with 300, I spend about, food here for myself a month, I'd say, is between £100 to £200 maybe. And that's including me going out occasionally getting a takeaway or fast food or anything like that. And I'm quite, I pay attention to my finances, but I'm not like scrimping horrendously. I mean, I could easily cut it down to 100 quid if I didn't have my innocent smoothies every day and that sort of thing. And it's just like, well, so you think that if you said £100 or ish to feed a person for a month and you've 30 grand, that's 300 people, you know, sorry, not 30, that's 3,000 people. No, is 30. See, I'm doing my maths terribly. 300 people, 300 times 100 is 30,000. So you think, well, you could feed, so like 300 people for a month on 30 grand. And that's just one person being incarcerated, you know. And you just think, if we could balance out the scales of the punishment from prisons to more community service stuff and the money that you'd use gets redistributed to help them, it'll make society so much more balanced. It'll make the people who've committed the crimes have better perspective. Not 100% of them, but I think it would help quite a few. And it would also help the rest of the community as well that's suffering.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I can't... But people just don't seem to want to try. And we've got all these people in power who've got all the money and, you know, all this other stuff. And it's just like, there's got to be another way of working it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the best photographs I've ever taken were in New York, but although those stick in my mind, the other thing that sticks in my mind is actually how horrific the homeless situation is there, and I cannot describe how much worse it is.
Yeah, I've heard in America it's pretty
and
bad.
they hide in the subways, and it's really unfortunate, but literally the smell of them is, you've been out here with nothing for a long time.
Yeah.
But it's just nothing. Like, life just goes on, and the rush goes on, and that, I think that's a key theme in photography as well, is that here's thousands of beautiful images and here's thousands of horrific images. But we just look at that and go, yeah, okay, that's just life, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
But where does that come from? Where's that? Okay, well...
Oh, sounds popular.
No, more like pestered. No, it's just my dad.
Oh, okay.
Shout out to my dad for interrupting the podcast.
I've actually had I've had my own phone alarm go off in like 6 or 7 podcasts before. We can pause it if you want to respond to him or something.
No, it's okay.
No problem. But yeah, with the homelessness thing as well, it's this is one of those times where obviously that whole thing, I can't do anything individual. Like with me personally, if I spent the rest of my life helping homeless and being a humanitarian, I could probably change a fair amount of lives, but I wouldn't change the country and the system. Even if I spent all my life helping everyone in Southampton, it wouldn't change England, for example, because there's a lot of issues which are problems with society which individuals in themselves can't change. But if we all change our sort of mindset, we can eventually bring in things to help them. And it is that, you know, I would love to grab a homeless person off the street, feed them, shower them, get them sorted out, send them off into the world, or give them money, you know, just give them a lot of money that I have. I don't have a lot of money, but, you know, and you could argue, yeah, that maybe that would change that one person's life and it could help. But if I don't make very much money, I don't make a little bit, I make like an alright amount to live on, but it's like, I don't make enough money to be able to spend it all on, like if my car blows up, I'm screwed. If something big happens in my life financially, I say screwed, it's more, I have to really watch my money. So you have these corporate elites who, like big business owners, like bankers, they give themselves like millions of pounds bonuses, and it's just like, no one needs more than £1 million a year. Like as general wage, some people argue, you know, footballers should, because of the advertising that football that goes into football, the amount of money that's in football, and actors, the amount of money that's in acting, and it's like, we have to kind of look at it in a way of, your job, you should get the right amount of money in relation to how difficult the job is to do and how much benefit it brings to society and how important it is. And to do that, unfortunately, you need to balance the scales in a way that people won't want it to. So yeah, you're an actor, you're in like Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr. in Iron Man in the Avengers movies, made like quite a few $100 million or something ridiculous, or 10 million or something. And it's like, well, he doesn't need that kind of money, you know. I'm sure he's a great guy, and the movies are fantastic. But you don't need to pay someone that. If you paid him less, and he was like, well, I'm not going to do that, then you go, okay, like, you could get someone who's a good enough actor and pay them. If filming Avengers takes 3 months, well, okay, a quarter of a year, let's say you give them as an actor $100,000 a year, right? That's still loads of money.
Oh yeah.
And, like, if you said I could do work for 3 months and earn 25 grand, I'd be like, yes, what the fuck? I'd love to do that. I don't earn 25 grand a year. Do you know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
we redistribute the money from there. But the problem is that with doing that, you have to have the government's hand in it more. And our government in Britain is, I know Avengers is American, but our government in Britain is quite shit in a lot of ways. And it's like the whole system needs a restructure. But to do that, you'd have to almost wipe it clean. And it's just like all these options that are so difficult to figure out what to do. But like, I think over time, hopefully it'll get better, and hopefully maybe it'll get worse before it gets better. But I believe optimistically that whether it takes 10, 100 or 1,000 years, hopefully the homelessness epidemic, the mental health epidemic, all these sorts of issues that are happening, if we can structure society in the right ways, redistribute the wealth in the right ways, but still have it like, I wouldn't want to live in a communist society where everyone gets paid the same, because that never works. You can't have a doctor earning the same as a shelf stacker at Tesco. You can't have that. It doesn't make sense. So you should have the balance of it and be able to redistribute the money, and then we can have more things that go into important stuff. Footballers don't need that kind of money and don't need like 10 Lamborghinis because they play football a little bit. You don't. The money there, even if you argue, they deserve it because of the money that's in football. It's like, but surely, quote unquote, deserving 15 million or whatever is not worth what someone needs it, the homelessness or NHS. And people can argue that the NHS is being cut and all the funding from that and slowly becoming more and more privatised. It's like, really, there's no really rich people who really want to sort that out, and it just triggers me.
Yeah, it's a very triggering subject, so I wonder actually how much people might say about this discussion, but it just feels like no one can do anything right, and everyone's doing something wrong, or everything you choose is the wrong thing to do. So you've kind of got to do what you think's best and give back where you can. I mean, like I said, if I see a homeless person that really looks down and out, I'll probably buy them a hot drink and something to eat, because I'd much rather do that than maybe go and spend their money on something that might be like dangerous to their life. Well,
yeah, with addicts, for example, with a lot of the homeless people, you don't know if some of them, like one of the gentlemen you spoke to, it can be really down on their luck and just all the sort of wrong things happen to them, maybe partially their own fault, but you can't be held accountable. Like, if you make a big mistake at one point in your life, I'm not talking about like killing someone or something like that, that's a bit extreme, but like being a real bad person maybe for a certain period of time or short period of time, or doing just one big wrong decision shouldn't necessarily impact you for your entire life negatively. You should be able to have a way of getting out of that. Well, the problem is you have with a lot of these homeless people, if they get £10 a day, that isn't enough for them to change their entire life around, but it is enough to continue the drug habit they've got, or the alcoholism or something. And obviously not every homeless person is bad, not every homeless person's addicted to anything, and True. I'm not saying anyone who's addicted to things is necessarily bad either. The human brain is glitched out to fuck. It's so many issues that come along with it, with the way our society's structured, primarily make it worse. With addicts, they need help. They don't need to be criminalised. They need to be helped get over their addiction. And you buying them a hot drink is good, because obviously that's going to help them. But you could give them £10. You could think that's going to do great. And because addicts a lot of the time, I wouldn't quite go so far as say that it's not in their control, but it's so much easier when you're an addict and you have nothing there to just go back on this drug or whatever, or keep drinking just to make whatever day feel slightly less shitty, because that £10, maybe it'll feed you for a little bit longer, but it's not going to change your life completely. And it's a difficult situation,
It is difficult, and several of the topics we've spoken about today are really tricky, but there's lots of photographers and photojournalists that are out there, and they are trying to make a difference with what they're showing, and it's not always all for the money. There's obviously good and bad to that industry always.
Oh yeah. All industries have that.
Yeah, exactly. But when is a picture or an article too shocking? Like, what is the final? That's not okay. That is 100% fully not okay. When's that enough? And it never is. And I mean, just recently another, the rhino.
Oh, the last one. Yeah, died.
Last male died, and we're like, well done, world. Like,
Yeah, so-
well done. But you wouldn't, like, it's been probably a couple of weeks since then, and it's already dropped off of the... Well, not for everyone, it hasn't, but in the terms of media, it's old news, it's dropped off.
Yeah.
And that is the industry we live in, is, like, bad news is the news. Like, good news doesn't make news. And it, you know, sometimes it does, but 9 times out of 10, if it's bad, that sells.
Yeah.
This image, that's bad, that sell. Oh, that looks really bad. People are going to look at that because they want to know what that is. And we go, oh my God, this is so horrific. This is terrible. And yeah, again, we'll close that magazine or that newspaper or turn the TV off, and then we go, oh, so what do you want for dinner?
Yeah.
And it just seems like a really, what?
Yeah, it's very upsetting. We need more focus to be on the right parts of life. I mean, and social media is great for a lot of things, it's bad for a lot of other things, but I like to hope we're in a transitionary period at the moment with the internet and social media and that sort of thing, and it's becoming... It's like, at the moment there's a lot of people who get, let's say, addicted to their phones or anything like that, but like, you get some people who are addicted to their phones or addicted to social media and that sort of thing, and they don't use it for any good. But there is a lot of social media which can be used for good. And what I'm hoping is, over time, more and more people, as our generations become more liberal and more... I feel there's a lot on the side of too much on political correctness. I'm not saying the N-word or anything like that. I think you shouldn't say that. But like, there are lines where people make too much of a fuss about issues that don't matter as much, when we could be focusing this group effort on things that matter a lot more. And I'm optimistic that is slowly going to be happening.
I mean, there's definitely a movement out there. I know plenty of photographers, and just people that use social media as well. Don't necessarily have to be a photographer or like someone that films or anything. Like, you can do it by yourself. But I know people that are involved in doing music and nature photography, and it's nice and it is positive. But I also know a lot of people that are active on, you know, like, don't kind of sit there and suffer in silence. Like, do what you want to do. Like, at the end of the day, like, you have to make yourself happy sometimes. And if that means approaching a difficult topic like mental illness, like, that's it. I actually work with someone that doesn't let mental illness define her, and that's what she says. So it doesn't define me. And she has such positive messaging out there, and it's honest. There's a lot of social media that's like, really happy today, blah blah blah, and it's around mental illness, but it isn't the reality. Whereas what she will do is, this was a really epic day, but at the time I was really being affected. And I told her, said, this is what people need because it's real and it will help others in that same situation. I mean, I've got a very close family member that suffers from mental illness, and it's really difficult. And I think when people see that kind of positive with realness, they say, I can relate, and you know what, I'm going to be brave today, and I'm going to feel like I can actually be honest and say something, and people will listen. And it's not kind of dramatized and made out to be a big hoo-ha, which can easily be made into that, but it's not.
Honesty is a key one with relatively everything in life. You know, with the social media, one puts up a face almost. You put on a way of putting things on there a lot, and some people do it and it's fine, and some people do it and I wouldn't approve of it all. But people are a lot of the time disingenuous on social media in the wrong ways, and what I find the internet is doing to a degree is making certain individuals easier to cover up a lot of things, both for other people and from themselves. And I just feel if the dialogue can be a lot more open and a lot more honest about all these things, then we can make change. And it's just people who are like, whenever people are worried about, I'm depressed, but I don't want to keep bothering my friend because I'm depressed. It's like, well, if you have the right kind of friends, they will always understand. You know, and if you have the kind of people who do ostracize you, sort of demonize you for being mentally ill or having these issues. There is a degree of you can't let it define you, as you said that your friend says and things. You can't let, say, if we use depression in this example, if you're depressed, you will get, with me regarding depression, my friends who are depressed, they get sympathy from me, and I'll help them in any way I can. If they have really low days and we have plans and they're like, I just feel crap today, Alex, why not? I'm like, yep, that's fine. Anything I can do to help, I will. But you also have to have that idea of, you have to take charge of your own life. It has to be, people should be sympathetic to those who are suffering, but also those who are suffering do need to push themselves and try and get out. And I think with the synergy of both, of people being more understanding and helping more, with people suffering understanding that they have a lot more power in their life than they think they do, and they have a lot more of a hold on their own mental illness than the mental illness has on them. Once they can understand that and they can start getting through it, you see so many people with depression who just get given loads of pills by doctors and just take these, you'll be fine, and then they take them and they feel numb, and then they try and come off them because they don't like the way they feel, and then they just crash again and start spiraling. And it's like, the options aren't suffer or be numb. It has to be, there are more ways to do that. And even though I obviously said about the doctors doing it, and it's easy to demonize the doctors for doing that sort of thing, but obviously with the NHS losing a lot of money and all these sorts of other things, it's difficult for doctors to be able to spend all that time on trying to help those people.
Yeah.
Which makes it even more difficult, and then it makes people who are suffering not want to do it even more, because they go, the NHS is cutting loads back. I don't want to waste an appointment with a doctor if someone's dying and they can have that. And then you get that happens a lot of mental illness, especially in the Western world. You go, I should be happy. I've got a house, I've got a job, I've got friends, I've got family. I should be happy, and I'm not. And then instead of trying to force themselves out of it and be like, I'm going to just do difficult things, I'm going to climb a mountain or go skiing or go skydiving or do any of these things, they end up feeling this guilt, and it makes them more introverted and makes them more boxed in. And it becomes this cycle of, I feel depressed, but I shouldn't do, so I'm a bad person, so I feel like I should feel depressed, which then makes you worse,
Yeah, I mean, at work, I volunteered to write a piece about what it's actually like to be the support for someone that is suffering with mental illness. Because actually that can really change things for someone, because it's to do with support networks and how you can actually help someone. And I was really honest in it, and at the end of the day, that is like trying to, just being there sometimes, or taking somebody out, or doing something that they enjoy just to take their mind off things.
Yeah.
And when they do have a bad day, be compassionate and understand, and just do what they need you to do and what is right. Like, don't force them to do anything that's going to be out of their comfort zone and potentially make things worse. And it really resonated with people because it was honest, and I just kind of put in there, if you think that it's down to the point where it could be a family member, your friends, your colleagues, and sometimes it just takes one question, like, is everything okay? Like, do you need 5 minutes just to chat or something? And it literally could be the difference that someone needs just to feel better at that moment. Or you could have been the first person to ask them if they were okay in a long time. So
yeah, 100% agree with that.
It's the power is with people. Honestly,
yeah. People can change a lot more of their own surroundings and everyone's around them much more than they give themselves credit for or believe they can.
Yeah,
it's all about the power of belief in a sense, but not necessarily faith or a god or a deity. If that helps you, then go ahead. But it's more the individual. You have much more of an impact on other people's lives around you than you think you do. And with that, it's, as you say, there are people who they're suffering, and they don't want to burden anyone with their idea of what was causing them depression or causing them these issues. They don't want to burden them. But if you ask them and you show that you want to help, then they'll often open up the floodgates. And even them talking about their issues, which can cause a lot of emotions to come out, even them doing that for even a 20-minute conversation, that could change their entire outlook on the whole month, and it's same with that, like a lady that you saw that we mentioned earlier, of like, if someone in town or someone anywhere you see is struggling with something or is in pain or anything like that, you trying to help them can really change their life completely. I mean, there's quite a few things on Reddit that I've read about people, when they're depressed, like what things have brought them out. And people have said things as simple as, I was in a shop and I just had a really low day, and a cashier served me, smiled at me and said they thought my hair was really cool. And just that tiny thing, because this girl had like different colour hair and whatnot. Just that thing, that minor compliment can really change something. I mean, I've been in, I'm not depressed. I don't have depression or any mental illnesses. Well, I haven't been diagnosed with any, so I assume I haven't. But even I get days where you feel really low and just feel like shit, and you're just like, I fucking hate everything. Sometimes you're like, what's the point in existing? Like, nothing at the moment. I watch TV shows, they're boring. I go outside, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to talk to anyone, don't want to do this. And then something will either happen, either I've had it both times where a mate of mine I haven't seen in a while, I was like, oh dude, you bet you don't want to hang out? And I'm like, I really, really don't want to. But I'll say yes, I'll just fucking do it. And then you feel great afterwards.
Yeah.
Or other ways of just, I've been to a shop before, and I think my tattoo, because obviously got the Star Wars tattoo, and I just had a bit of a crap day, and nothing was going right. And then I just end up having this 5-minute conversation with someone talking about Star Wars and tattoos and stuff. And after that, I was just having one short positive conversation changed the whole day. And from then I was fine.
Exactly. It's like what you said about, someone at the restaurant got the order wrong, and there's someone literally just like screaming and going at this person. And it literally could be, it could affect everything. Instead of them just saying, oh, like, sorry to bother you, but like, I think my order got mixed up a bit. Like, do you mind just checking for me? Like,
yeah.
That's totally different. As well as you said, that cashier said to that lady, your hair's really cool. And it's almost like we're afraid to say things. I've said it to a lady before, like an older lady. I thought she looked really beautiful. And I said, you look really good. You look fantastic. And she was like, oh my gosh. Thank you so
People
much.
are surprised nowadays, aren't they? When you
like,
compliment people, they get surprised about it, which is actually quite upsetting. It's like, there are so many people who are incredible and they don't see themselves in this way because everyone just either just thinks they're really cool but never says it, and then all they hear is the negativity, and it does start to wear down on you a lot of the time. People, we need to, like, with a lot of my friends, I'm affectionate. I tell all my mates, male and female, that I love them all the time because I want to give everyone hugs when I can and that sort of thing. And it's it's only a small thing on my part, but it can be a big thing on someone else's. You don't know what people are going through, and you don't know if you yell at that waiter, that it could be that final straw of that day, and they just lose it. And there's a thing which was studies shows, and another thing with this guy was talking to people about this. People try and jump off bridges, try and kill themselves. It's been shown that a lot of the time they just haven't had a normal positive conversation with someone for months. Yeah. And humans are social creatures. We need others to flourish. And if you're just never nice to each other, you're never this, never that, eventually it just starts to, your mind can't function properly.
Yeah, my colleague actually said that we basically need at least 10 minutes of human contact. Like, that could be like having a hug with someone, holding someone's hand, or just being generally like close to them.
Yeah.
And it really makes a big difference, which when she said that, it kind of was like, like people that live alone, or like old people that don't have anyone popping in on them. It's really easy to understand how people feel isolated, and it really goes downhill fast because they've done social experiments before where someone's literally had no contact for, like, I think they did like a couple of days or something, and he just said that it was like losing himself because there was no one to bounce anything off. You just have your own thoughts and no one to kind of converse with, or even to hug. Like you said, you hug your friends and they might be having a crappy day, you wouldn't know, and that little hug, without you even knowing, is probably like, finally, like someone like being nice. Oh my gosh, like that's what I needed today.
Well, it's like with babies, for example. I can't remember where I heard this. The scientific validity of this may not be full once again, but I heard it was with babies in their first certain amount of time of being alive, they're to be held, and there are certain children who when they go through critical conditions and things, they have to be in these those incubator unit things where they have some breathing for them, but usually in that sort of circumstance it's slightly different. But if you're just a standard fairly healthy baby, I've been told that if they're not held a certain amount, they can just die, like from lack of contact. If they're not, if they haven't had, not even necessarily affection in from necessarily a family member, just nurses sometimes holding them up and just holding them, because nurses now in like a lot of clinics, when you get those rooms with all the babies and stuff in, nurses often picking them up, holding them just a certain amount of time for each baby, because if you leave them and don't touch them, they can just die. And it's like that. Yeah, just the thought of no human contact can make someone die, and you get, as I said earlier, people who are the most miserable are normally the ones that are most isolated.
There must be some truth in that, actually, because I saw a thing about just an old retired guy, and he volunteers and goes into the baby units, and he just holds the babies, and just hugs them and stuff, and people are like, oh, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? And he was like, these babies need contact. Like, you don't know their situation. And like you said, with children that may have serious illnesses, sometimes you don't know how far parents have had to travel to actually have their child in that unit or that hospital.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not financially feasible for them to stay in a hotel. Obviously, they may get some support, but there's only a limited time that will happen.
Yeah.
So they may not be able to get there as quickly. They might have like a 4-hour drive or something every day. So that, that old guy just going into, just sit with the little babies and give them that contact that they need. There must be some truth in that they do generally need it. And I think it's that thing of, I think I've heard somewhere as well, when people are sick or something, that contact can help as well.
Yeah.
And improve, because they almost, I don't know, maybe they get kind of like positive energy from everyone around them and stuff. It's hard to know.
Yeah, I just quickly looked it up on my phone, and apparently it says that it's basically exactly what you've just said. And it's an article here. It's on Psychology Today, and the article is called "Touching Empathy." I googled, for anyone who wants to listen to this, I just googled babies dying from lack of touch, and so I just brought this up, and it says, I'll just quickly read out a couple bits from it. There's an article, but it's not surprising. We live in a country that's starved for physical affection, a place where an outbreak of hugging by high school students prompts media coverage and even alarm, whereas in other cultures it's not very remarkable and people generally celebrate it. Also noting that touch can ease pain, lift depression, and even possibly increase the odds that teams win in games. But touch is even more vital than this. Babies who are not held and nuzzled and hugged enough will literally stop growing, and if the situation lasts long enough, even if they're receiving proper nutrition, they can die. I said that researchers discover that when trying to figure out why some orphanages have infant mortality rates around 30 to 40%, we now know that the orphanages that are no place for infant babies aged 0 to 5, simply because they don't receive enough stimulation in group residential care to develop in the fullest of their capabilities. And the article goes on for loads of other stuff. And it says individualized physical parental attention. Nurturing the baby is necessary for the brain to learn to connect human contact with pleasure, as this is one of the foundations of empathies, which also connected through touch and shared smiles. Well, that, I said I'll probably put a link to that article in the description if I remember. But it's just knowing that human babies can actually die from not being touched. It's like, what? And then people go through, as you say, especially with old people, they get times where they just haven't been touched by anyone for a very long time, and you just have to think about all the physiological things that can do to someone, both mentally and also for your actual body and stuff.
Exactly.
It's crazy. What I was going to say is we've got a little bit of time left, but we're approaching the 2-hour mark. And so I've got a couple of questions I've got written down. I was just curious, and I think it will fit in quite nicely to what we've been talking about.
Okay.
So here's 2 questions. They're quite similar, but I'll ask one of them first, which is, so dream job. If you could say you got paid a perfect amount for whatever, you choose a job, money's not an object. What precisely would it be if you had to choose sort of one thing?
Oh, this might actually shock you a bit. Magazine designer.
Oh, really? Okay.
I love mag design. Oh my god. It's just fantastic. So varied as well. Really got a flair for it at uni actually. And at the time I was just picking options for a couple of years and just love it so much. And it can vary, and the styles they change, and what's favoured changes. Like at the moment, kind of using using space for one image or one bit of massive text is really popular. Whereas before, if there was a blank space, it would be like the end of the world, because blank space is dead space. But that's what I would love to do, and who knows whether I might end up there one day. But I'm in my kind of job now, and on the side I try to kind of improve those kinds of things and teach myself new things, because that industry like evolves so quickly, and the way we're kind of looking at those kinds of materials is, yes, people still buy magazines, but it's also like kind of migrating to kind of like an online thing as well. So like I told you earlier, I'm trying to teach myself like design code, but obviously it's really extensive and takes time, but hopefully maybe one day might get to that kind of thing. It's
that's really cool. Because when I worked at the last place I worked at, Whizbit, and it was the CD production and cassette manufacturing place. That was graphic design based, a lot of it. It was admin, production, and graphic design. So, in fact, because people at my new work know about this, I've helped design a couple of brochures and pamphlets and stuff like that, just for a few things. And it's weird, isn't it? Because when I describe, because I designed CDs for people as well, and certain leaflets for other people, whether it's businesses or bands and people's wedding invites, all that sort of jazz. And it's a weird one when it comes to design, because I find trying to teach someone what goes where correctly is such a hard thing to do. I just know when it's wrong. So when I find with projects, if someone sends me something I have to revamp, I love it. I can do it so quickly, because I look at it and go, right, that's wrong, that looks rubbish, and you change them, and then the rest falls into place. But I found that when it's like creating something from scratch, that was always the hardest for me, because I just go, well, okay, I've got a blank canvas, and they've given me this amount of text and these pictures, and you just go, sometimes you can stare at it for 10 minutes and not do anything, and you're like, but what the best things I found to do is just kind of chuck them all on the page, in a sense, fit them in, and then look at it and go, right, that doesn't look right there, and why not? And then you can tweak it. But it's such a hard thing to explain to someone, like, what if someone said, what's wrong with this brochure? I could probably explain it to them in a bit, but it'd be so much easier for me just to show them what a right brochure was, in a sense. It's a hard one.
I mean, even in my job now, I do a lot of that kind of thing, and we obviously have a brand, so you have to follow that brand and work towards it. And some of the things I get sent, obviously people have tried, and I really appreciate it when people do try, because they're not instantly just assuming that I'm going to have time to make something for them straight away. But they have kind of idea, and then you transform it, and when they get it back, they're really just like, oh, this is amazing. And I think that's kind of the good thing as well. But you're totally right, sometimes you sit there and you go, oh, I do not know how to make this work, and it isn't until you kind of dump it on the page and move things around, and take out what's necessarily like needed, because sometimes you get too much text and things, and if someone's not getting the message quite quickly, they're not going to look at what you're trying to put across. So
exactly. It's it is a weird one, but I've quite like graphic design, because I'm not I can't draw. I'm terrible at drawing. I'm terrible at painting, anything artsy like that. I'm probably quite crap at making things with clay, but I haven't tried. Maybe that's my talent. But I kind of always know what it should be, in a sense, which is probably why it frustrates me so much when I try and draw, because I know exactly how it should look. I just can't do that. In
your head, like, I have a masterpiece, and then you look at your paper and it looks like a potato. Like, not what I had in mind.
That's exactly right. And with graphic design, I find also, if you make a mistake, you can, obviously when it's on the computer and it's graphics and stuff, so it's like, you just undo whatever you just did.
Exactly.
So you just fuck up and you go Control-Z, just done. Like, don't even think about it. If I do something wrong, just undo it immediately. And I like that, where the trial and error aspect of it, and just spending ages just putting everything in a certain place and go, oh, you know what, that should go there, but if that goes there, that goes there, and then you end up you think you're going to tweak one thing, and then you end up rearranging the whole thing, and then you go, I think that looks good, and then compare it to the original that you had, which you thought was basically ready, and you go, what? That looks terrible comparison. It's weird. I like having it where you get the starting point and the end point. You look at them between the two, and as you say, when I did wedding CDs for people and things like that, and they'd be like, they draw this really crude drawing, like with a pen, just vaguely saying, like, I want a picture there, and I want a picture of that there, and a picture there. Can you kind of throw something together? I just want this one thing. And then when I get that, it's like, yes, I get one core. I sort out what they want first, and then you put your own spin around it. And some of the things that you make, you think, oh, it's fantastic. And then you give it to them, and they are completely blown away, and they go like, I've had people go, that is exactly how I saw it in my head, but I can draw it. Or they go, that is 10 times better than I thought.
Yeah.
And it's so gratifying when you can help someone with their... It's obviously, when it comes to graphic design, it's slightly more minor and low key, but it's like, even things like that, when someone has a vision for something they want, and you nail it, and it's so gratifying, just almost like a connection.
Definitely.
But that's, of interest, would it be any kind of magazines, or do you have like a...
Just any. I mean, I've done quite a lot. When I was at uni, basically, the way the degree worked is that they taught you how to take the picture, how to write the article, and how to build what those things would go into, what kind of magazine it would go into. So I've actually done varied. Like, I've photographed pole dancing before.
Okay.
I've photographed downhill mountain biking, photographed like NASCAR. Then I photograph animals. Like, it's really varied. So actually I've kind of designed quite a few things that fit all those kind of categories. And if you think about the types of magazines those things would go into, they'd all be very different. So I don't think necessarily there'd be kind of one sort of style, but you never know what you're going to fall into, and something might just suit me down to the ground. But
well, if you're into everything as well, what's quite good about that is you get the innovation of it. So you could work, argument's sake, you work in one area, and then you use aspects from another area that you like to put it in that, which other people who are in that, like people only doing animal photography and exclusively that, and they need to put an article about it in a slightly different magazine, they wouldn't be able to say structure it or write it in the exact same way as it would be in a nature magazine, because it's a slightly different audience, slightly different thing. And it's good to be the jack of all trades sort of thing, where you have ideas about everything, because you can then pull things across. So yeah, that's really cool. I'll say one other thing, which is I really feel like I should start asking everyone on the podcast this, but I always forget. But I wrote it down, so I haven't. If you were just given like a huge sum of money, say £1 million or something, you couldn't spend it on, say, a house to live in or anything like that. What you had to do is you had to invest it in a sort of, in something, in a way. I'll use I word the question terribly. With me, for example, if you gave me loads and loads of money, I would open up like a big studio area with podcasting equipment, musical equipment, basically anything that studios require. And I would try and sort out, if money wasn't obviously the object, wasn't the problem rather, I would try and sort out, especially kids and adults who can't maybe afford to pursue certain passions, to just be able to some have podcasts or just have a couple of hours in a music recording studio, or just come in a group of people, play loads of instruments, have a bit of fun, and just have this sort of media hub of different ideas for equipment that's quite expensive that people may not be able to afford. That's, if you gave me a large sum of money, I do video stuff as well, so I'd have like music video studios and green screens, that sort of jazz. And that's probably the route that I'd want to go down if money was never an object and I could just do anything I wanted. So like with would you, for other examples that people have given, like my friend Carla, she wanted to do like a whole community. She would basically have this whole community of people who can't afford to live, that sort of thing, and they'd all have this self-sustaining agricultural thing, and there'd be a nice little community.
Yeah.
Other people have said travel the world, explore things, but also be humanitarian, help certain people, but also just explore different cultures. So if I just gave you a huge sum of money and I just said you can't buy a house or do something really easy and sensible with, like if I got a huge sum of money, I'd just buy loads of property and live off the rent. But if I just gave you X amount of million, would there be like a specific thing you want to do with it? Like
I definitely, we were talking about this before we started podcast, but definitely giving stuff back to the community is really like big thing that's on my mind at the moment. And quite similarly to what you said, sometimes situation for individuals, they want to do things but they don't necessarily have the money, the environment, the tools to do those things. Mm-hmm. So I'd probably like to do some sort of, project where people can maybe get some qualifications or work towards something that they would like to do that maybe would help improve their chances of getting a job or something. But then you said someone's wanted to travel, do, work across the world. I mean, obviously that would be a really great thing to do as well, but I think it's very difficult. Comes back to the kind of, you need a group to do something. It depends how far you could get, but yes. I think giving opportunities to those that need it, because if I was, if I had that amount of money, it sounds like I've already had the opportunity to do what I need to do. So maybe it's a case of passing down knowledge, or even actually one thing it's really close to my heart, and I think mental illness is a big thing. It's a big part of my life. So maybe kind of doing talks or something, having a team that could go into schools, colleges, universities. Like, it really varies depending on what age you are and the way you take in information, and sometimes it is just putting it plainly. So maybe that's what I would work at and see if I could do work to help improve that in any way I could.
Yeah, so some sort of almost community outreach sort of project, but a lot more money and time invested into it, so you can tailor it to like the different audiences. So you wouldn't have to just focus on, you could have a variety. You could have people dealing almost with their own demons and other people's. You could have it where you'd have certain kids you could go to who've suffered through abuse, and other ones who are suffering with potentially their sexuality and issues like that, as well as my sister-in-law works with young carers who are people who care for often they're older, if their parents are really, really ill or that sort of thing, and they have to, so there's those sorts of things as well as, you could get for adults who are homeless or have drug habit issues and these sorts of things. So you'd want to be able to help almost any group of individuals just almost find themselves and kind of come back into society and help them feel less alienated.
Definitely. And sometimes the label of mental illness, it falls into, it is mental illness. It's so varied and so complex. It is a very individual thing, and it is different for every single person. Like you said, you have your friends, I have friends too, and if you put two sufferers next to each other, the chances are they probably would have not a lot in common.
Yeah.
So I think that is definitely what I would do.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. I think that's a really, really nice way to word it on. I mean, we're about 1 hour 50, so it's been a nice long conversation.
Yeah.
I think it's been absolutely fantastic. So, it's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Erin.
Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. And I'll talk to you guys next week. And that's the end of part 2. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys, especially past that really rambly intro part. Next week will be a chat with my buddy Jack. I can't 100% remember what we spoke about, and I should have really listened to it back, but it's really late on a Sunday and I'm super tired and I've been really busy this weekend, and I'm kind of half doing this last minute because I'm a terrible person and a terrible podcast host, so I'm sorry, guys. I think we talk about the universe and conspiracy theories and aliens and all that sort of jazz. I think it's very light on the conspiracy theories. I don't think we delve that far deeply into that. It's kind of intertwined with aliens and stuff. I think tomorrow I'm recording an episode with my buddy Ryan, so I may end up releasing that one actually, because that was the one I was going to record a couple of weeks ago. He's in a band, so I don't know. I kind of, as I said, I think at the end of the last podcast, I'm kind of winging it a little bit. But that's kind of what you got to do when you have loads of guest hosts. If I structure my podcast so it was just me talking the entire time, it would be horrendous. No one would really want to listen to it. And then if I had a co-host all the time, it would be a lot more difficult to organise. Try to make sure we're both at the same time ready to do it all, and who does the editing, who does this, who does that, and I can't be bothered with that, at least in this way, even though I have to keep sort of always trying to be finding new guests to keep the things interesting. It does mean I'm a little bit of things are a bit up in the air half the time, but I've got things in the pipeline. I think this month I've got quite a few planned to record as well, so it should be a fun. Yep, that's all I'm going to say. Not it should be a fun month or anything like that. It just should be a fun. So thanks as always for tuning in, guys. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, subscribe on any of the podcast apps and YouTube. leave any comments, send me an email, genuine chit-chat at outlook.com, or a Facebook message or Instagram message, or tweet at me, and anything along those lines. I'm always happy to speak with anyone. If anyone has any criticisms or anything they want to recommend or anything like that, I'm always open to either a discussion or critique or compliments. That's a nice one, isn't it? Give me a few compliments as spoken about in this podcast, actually. That's not a hint at all. Anyway, guys, thanks as always for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next week.